What if I told you the Dead Sea holds the secret to breaking free from whatever's holding you back? In the next few minutes, I will show you why some parts of your life feel stagnant, and more importantly, how to create the flow you're craving. Welcome to the Live Free, Love Life podcast, where we discuss how to create more freedom so we can love our lives no matter what we're going through. Hello, my beautiful friends. Let's start today with some imagery. Picture yourself standing at the shores of the Dead Sea. The water stretches out before you, still and lifeless. While other bodies of water teem with life and activity, this one remains stagnant. The reason is simple yet profound. While it constantly receives water from the Jordan River, it has no outlet, no way to give, no way to flow. This natural phenomenon holds a powerful lesson for our lives. Vitality requires flow. When we observe the Dead Sea, we see the end result of receiving without giving: stagnation, heaviness, and an inability to sustain life. But there's another side to the story. Just as the Dead Sea shows us the danger of all input with no output, a dried up riverbed shows us what happens with all output and no input: depletion, emptiness, and an equal inability to sustain life. Think about your breath for a moment. Life itself depends on this constant flow. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. You can't just inhale forever, nor can you only exhale. It's the rhythm of both that sustains us. This same principle of flow applies to every aspect of our lives. Dr. Mihaly, I can't pronounce his name, so go to your email newsletter or check my blog if you want to know more. There's a link there. He's renowned for his research on optimal experience, and he describes flow as the state in which people are so involved in an activity that nothing else seems to matter. But achieving this state requires more than just engagement. It requires the right conditions. Just as a river needs both a source and an outlet to flow freely, we need both input and output to create optimal conditions in our life. So let's talk about what happens when we restrict flow in either direction. When we constantly take in without giving out, several things happen to us. Like the Dead Sea, we become dense with accumulated resources that have nowhere to go. This might look like endless consumption of self-help books without implementation. It could look like attending workshop after workshop without applying the lessons, or constantly seeking advice without taking action. Dr. Angela Duckworth, the author of Grit, describes this phenomenon as passive learning syndrome. We feel like we're making progress because we're accumulating knowledge, but without application, that knowledge becomes dead weight. This creates a false sense of movement while actually keeping us stuck. The accumulation without application often leads to mental overwhelm from too much information, decision paralysis from too many options, decreased confidence from lack of real-world experience, feelings of inadequacy despite extensive knowledge, and a growing gap between what we know and what we do. On the flip side, there's the danger of constant output without sufficient input. Dr. Christina Maslach, creator of the Maslach Burnout Inventory, has spent decades studying this phenomenon. Her research shows that when we continuously give without replenishing ourselves, we experience a 3-stage progression. 1, emotional exhaustion; 2, depersonalization; and 3, reduced personal accomplishment. Think of a river trying to flow without a source. Eventually, it runs dry. This pattern shows up in workaholics who pride themselves on their productivity, caregivers who put everyone else's needs before their own, and high achievers who push themselves relentlessly without proper rest or recovery. Despite appearing successful on the outside, they often feel increasingly empty and disconnected from their sense of purpose. The people-pleasing pattern falls into this category as well. Dr. Brené Brown calls this hustling for worthiness, constantly giving to others in an attempt to earn love and acceptance. This pattern may look virtuous on the surface, but it creates its own form of bondage, restricting our freedom just as surely as the Dead Sea's lack of outflow. So let's explore how this principle of flow shows up in different areas of our lives. First, let's look at physical vitality. Our bodies provide one of the clearest examples of flow in action. We've all heard the saying, you can't exercise your way out of a bad diet. This is output without input. Conversely, simply consuming healthy food isn't enough either. We need movement and exercise to process those nutrients effectively. Exercise isn't just about movement, it's about creating flow, blood flow, lymphatic flow, digestive flow. Our bodies are designed for constant motion and exchange. Jack LaLanne, fitness and nutrition expert, said, exercise is king, nutrition is queen, put them together, and you've got a kingdom. Even exercise itself requires this rhythm. Sports scientists have long understood that muscle growth happens during recovery, not during the workout itself. The input, rest and nutrition, is just as crucial as the output, training and movement, for achieving optimal results. Okay, so let's talk about money for a minute. Money, like water, is meant to flow. Those who restrict this flow often create their own limitations. Some people hold too tightly, saving every penny while denying themselves experiences and opportunities that could enhance their lives. They avoid being generous, resist investing in themselves, and maintain a constant state of scarcity, even when they have enough or plenty. Others let money flow out without ensuring adequate input, creating financial drought. Both patterns restrict freedom. The wealthiest individuals understand that money, like any resource, requires healthy flow. Input through multiple streams of income, thoughtful investments, and value creation, balanced with output through strategic spending, reinvestment, and generosity. When it comes to spiritual growth and development, Ram Dass captured the essence of spiritual flow when he said, we're all just walking each other home. This illustrates how spiritual growth requires both receiving and giving. While personal practices like meditation or scripture study create input, they find their fullest expression through service, teaching, and practical application. The Dalai Lama emphasizes this saying, our prime purpose in this life is to help others. Yet, even he maintains a rigorous personal practice to sustain his ability to serve. It's this flow that creates sustainable spiritual growth. Okay, looking at mental health and emotional well-being, Dr. Dan Siegel, a clinical professor of psychiatry at UCLA, emphasizes that mental health requires both receiving and processing emotional experiences. We need safe spaces to acknowledge and feel our emotions, input, combined with healthy ways to express and process them, output. Just as a river needs both banks to flow properly, we need both containment and expression in our emotional lives. Without this flow, emotions either become stagnant and heavy or dry up entirely, leaving us disconnected from ourselves and others. Another area we could look at is creativity and innovation. Elizabeth Gilbert, author of Big Magic, describes creativity as a conversation between what we take in and what we put out. Artists need to consume art. Writers need to read. Musicians need to listen to music. But consumption alone doesn't make us creators. We must also produce, experiment, and share our work. The most innovative creators maintain this flow. They stay curious and open to input while maintaining regular creative practice, output. This creates a sustainable flow of creativity rather than sporadic bursts followed by long dry spells. Now, let's dive into relationships and connection for a minute. Dr. John Gottman, who's one of my favorite, his research reveals that successful relationships require active participation in both giving and receiving. This is not a surprise to any of us. After studying thousands of couples in his love lab, he found that relationships thrive when both partners engage in what he calls turning toward each other. This includes both reaching out, output, and being receptive to our partner's bids for connection, input. When this flow becomes blocked in either direction, relationships suffer. Many of us fall into patterns of either constant giving without receiving or constant taking without contributing. Dr. Sue Johnson, creator of emotionally focused therapy, explains that secure attachment requires both the ability to reach for support and the capacity to offer it. When we are stuck in one mode, we create disconnection even as we try to build closeness. Think about the input side of relationships, being willing to receive love and care, allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, accepting influence from our partner, taking in feedback and guidance, and learning about our partner's world. While these receptive qualities are essential, they must be balanced with active output, which is expressing our own needs and feelings, offering support and understanding, sharing our inner world, taking action on what we learn about our partner, creating experiences together, and finding ways to serve our partner. Dr. Stan Tatkin emphasizes that this balance creates what he calls a couple bubble, a secure, functioning relationship where both partners can safely give and receive. This requires breaking free from some of the common relationship restricting patterns, like the caretaker pattern of always giving and never receiving, or the victim pattern of always receiving and never giving, or the independent pattern of refusing both to give or receive, and the controller pattern of giving only to get something in return. True intimacy emerges when we can move fluidly between giving and receiving. This creates what Dr. David Schnark calls differentiation, the ability to maintain our sense of self while deeply connecting with another. It's this ebb and flow that allows relationships to become a source of freedom rather than limitation. Same principle applies to our friendships, our family relationships, and our professional connections, but it becomes especially crucial in parenting. Many mothers, I'm talking to you, mama, find themselves constantly pouring into their children while neglecting their own replenishment. They cook, they clean, they drive, they help with homework, they manage schedules, they provide emotional support, and they give endlessly of themselves. This pattern often leads to exhaustion, resentment, and a loss of personal identity. I know because I coach you all on it. Dr. Shafalsi Tasbury, clinical psychologist and author of The Conscious Parent, explains that this pattern of all output actually diminishes our parenting effectiveness. When we're depleted, we can't show up as the parents we want to be. More importantly, we model unhealthy relationship patterns that our children may carry into their own lives. The key is maintaining healthy flow, whether that's accepting help, taking time for self-care, or simply allowing ourselves to be human and imperfect. It means understanding that taking care of ourselves isn't selfish. It's essential for being the kind of parent our children need. This creates freedom not only for us, but for our entire family system. Each relationship offers opportunities for both input and output, giving and receiving, learning and teaching. When we maintain this flow, our relationships become vibrant sources of growth and joy rather than draining obligations or sources of resentment. True freedom in relationships comes not from perfecting our ability to give, but from mastering the dance between giving and receiving. So, how do we create sustainable flow in our lives? First, you have to recognize your natural rhythm. Just as every river has its own pace, every person has a unique rhythm that feels natural and sustainable. So notice your personal patterns of input and output. When do you feel most energized? When do you need replenishment? Second, remove blockages. Identify what's restricting flow in your life. Are you holding too tightly in some areas? Are you giving too freely in others? Just as rivers need clear channels to flow, we need to clear what is ever blocking our natural movement. Third, we're going to create channels. Establish systems that support healthy flow. As James Clear notes in Atomic Habits, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your system. Creating systems that support input, output, and flow is key to sustainable change. So this might include regular practices for both input and output, clear boundaries that protect your resources, structured time for both activity and rest, regular check-ins with yourself, accountability partnership, or transition rituals between activities. And lastly, we want to monitor flow. Pay attention to signs of restriction. Are you feeling stagnant and heavy, depleted and dry? Are you feeling overwhelmed with information but not taking action? Are you pushing yourself without proper rest? These signals can help you adjust before reaching extremes. Now, if we're going to be successful at creating more flow in our lives, we must understand the power of letting go, which we've talked about before. Just as rivers must release water to make room for fresh flow, we must learn to let go to create space for new possibilities. Dr. Daniel J. Siegel describes this as mind sight, the ability to perceive our old patterns clearly so we can choose new ones. Often, we restrict our own flow by holding on to things that no longer serve us, like a dam holding back water. Our attachments to past hurts, outdated beliefs, and familiar patterns create stagnation. In nature, stagnant water becomes toxic. In our lives, refusing to let go creates similar toxicity, resentment, bitterness, and limitation. So let's talk about some of the areas where letting go creates freedom. The first is past experiences. When we cling to old stories about ourselves or others, we prevent new narratives from emerging. A woman holding on to the pain of her first marriage brings that stagnant energy into her new relationship. By letting go of past hurts through forgiveness and processing, she creates space for fresh connection and trust. Second, identity and self-image. Our attachment to who we think we are often prevents us from becoming who we could be. Dr. Carol Dweck's research shows how a fixed mindset, holding tightly to our current capabilities, restricts growth. Letting go of limiting self-definition allows us to flow into new possibilities. Third, professional evolution. Many people stay stuck in unfulfilling careers because they can't let go of sunk costs, status, or others' expectations. Until they release their grip on the familiar, they can't reach for new opportunities. A lawyer who releases his attachment to his hard-earned degree creates space to pursue his passion for teaching. Okay, area number 4, parenting. As children grow, parents must continually let go to allow healthy development. Holding too tightly restricts not only the child's growth, but also the parent's ability to adapt and grow with their changing role. Dr. Shepley Tasbury emphasizes that conscious parenting requires constant letting go of our expectations and control. And area number 5, methods that no longer serve. Sometimes we cling to ways of doing things simply because they're familiar. Whether it's business strategies, relationship patterns, or daily habits, refusing to let go of outdated methods keeps us stuck. Innovation requires release. The art of letting go doesn't mean abandoning everything. It means creating space for flow. Like exhaling to make room for fresh air, we release the old to welcome the new. This process itself is a form of flow. Letting go, output, creates space for receiving, input. Dr. Brene Brown captures this paradox when she says, the middle is messy, but it's also where magic happens. The space between letting go and what comes next can feel uncomfortable. But just as a river's empty spaces create the conditions for movement, our willingness to release creates the conditions for transformation. Now let's talk about some of the common obstacles to flow and how to overcome them. This certainly isn't an extensive list, but it will at least get you started. The first obstacle is time pressure. When we feel pressured for time, we often sacrifice either input, skipping rest and reflection, or output, endless preparation without action. Many of us fall into the trap of thinking, I don't have time to rest, or I don't have time to implement everything I'm learning. Dr. Jim Lower's research at the Human Performance Institute shows that strategic renewal actually creates more time than it takes. By maintaining healthy flow, we become more efficient and effective. This might look like taking short renewal breaks between focused work periods, or using transition times, like commutes, for either input or output. combining activities where appropriate. So, like learning while you're exercising, creating systems that support flow without requiring extra time, and prioritizing essential practices that maintain your energy. Okay, obstacle number 2 is scarcity mindset. Our beliefs about resources, whether time, money, energy, or love, can create artificial restrictions in flow. Dr. Carol Dweck's research shows that a fixed mindset, believing resources are limited, leads to hoarding behaviors, while a growth mindset, believing in abundance, supports healthy flow. Signs of scarcity thinking include constant worry about not enough, difficulty giving or receiving, feeling threatened by other people's success, resistance to investing in yourself, and holding on to things that no longer serve you. To overcome this, start noticing where scarcity thoughts arise. Challenge these thoughts with evidence of abundance in your life. And the abundance is everywhere if you look for it. Remember that natural systems operate on principles of flow and renewal, not scarcity and depletion. Obstacle number 3, cultural pressure. Our society often celebrates extremes, either constant productivity, all output, or endless self-improvement, all input. Social media amplifies these messages, making us feel like we're never doing enough in either direction. Dr. Brené Brown's research on shame and vulnerability shows us how these cultural messages can disconnect us from our natural rhythms. The key is developing what she calls shame resilience, the ability to maintain your own healthy patterns despite external pressure. Now, this might mean defining your own measures of success. It might mean creating boundaries around social media consumption, or it could mean finding communities that support balanced living, or celebrating both rest and productivity. And it certainly means trusting your body's natural signals. Okay, obstacle number 4 is perfectionism. The desire to get things perfect often disrupts natural flow. We either hold back output until everything's perfect, creating stagnation, or push ourselves relentlessly toward an impossible standard, creating depletion. Dr. Kristen Neff's research on self-compassion offers an alternative. By cultivating kind self-acceptance, we can maintain healthier flow. This includes accepting that imperfection is part of the human experience, viewing mistakes as learning opportunities, allowing yourself to be a beginner, celebrating progress over perfection, and understanding that flow itself isn't perfect. Obstacle number 5, past trauma. Sometimes past experiences create blocks in our natural flow. Trauma can make it difficult to trust, receive, or express freely. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, author of The Body Keeps the Score, explains how trauma disrupts our natural rhythms and how we can restore them. Recovery involves working with qualified professionals when needed, gradually rebuilding trust in natural processes, starting with small, safe expressions of flow, creating supportive conditions for healing, and honoring your own timing and readiness. Obstacle number 6 is relationship dynamics. Our relationships can either support or hinder healthy flow. Codependent patterns, power struggles, and unresolved conflicts can all create blockages. Dr. Sue Johnson's research shows how secure attachment allows for natural giving and receiving, while insecure attachment creates restriction. So here are some ideas to help maintain healthy flow in relationships. Communicate your needs clearly. Respect other people's boundaries. Address conflicts directly. Allow for different rhythms. And create safe spaces for vulnerability. Obstacle number 7 is environmental factors. Our physical environment can impact our ability to maintain flow. Clutter, noise, toxic environments, or lack of natural spaces can all create resistance. Environmental psychology research shows how our surroundings affect our internal states. Creating supportive environments might include things like organizing your space to support flow, spending time in nature, creating transition zones, reducing unnecessary stimulation, and designing spaces that nurture both input and output. Remember, obstacles aren't failures. They are opportunities to adjust your approach. Like a river finding its way around rocks, we can learn to maintain flow even when facing challenges. The key is responding with flexibility and wisdom rather than rigid resistance or complete surrender. So before we wrap up, let's take a moment to reflect. Which extreme do you tend toward? All input or all output? Where do you tend to restrict flow through holding too tightly or giving too freely? What activities help you feel most in flow? Where could you benefit from more input? And where could you benefit from more output? How could you create more natural rhythm in your daily life? And what's one small step you could take today toward better flow? Remember, the goal isn't rigid control. It's creating conditions that support natural flow. Like a healthy river system, when we allow both input and output, we create the conditions for life, growth, and lasting transformation. The Dead Sea teaches us that life requires movement and exchange. By consciously creating flow in our lives, we create the freedom to truly thrive. This flow isn't just about productivity or achievement. It's about creating the conditions for a rich, meaningful life filled with both growth and contribution. Live free, love life. Thanks so much for watching today. Before you go, hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you never miss an episode. And while you're still here, I've got something special for you. My Live Free, Love Life membership now has a completely free level. You can start transforming your life right now without spending a dime. You'll get access to certain courses, content, and tools that will help you break free from whatever is holding you back and create a life you absolutely love. And when you're ready for even more support, you can easily upgrade to get access to our live coaching calls, as well as way more tools and content. There's honestly no reason not to join the free level today. Just click the link in the description below to get started. Until next time, live free, love life.